Guys, we worked together for a long time here, a couple of us, and as a work exercise, we Googled it, and it doesn't mean that. It means two things. It derives from the name Elfwind, and it means friend of elves. That's what's interesting.
Hi, my name is Coral Gary, she, her, and I wasn't named until 3 months after my birth. And everybody who's older than me in my family claims that they chose my name.
Hey everyone, my name is Kristen Catherine, she, her pronouns. What's unique about my middle names, I have two middle names, Mary Eleanor, and it's named after both of my grandmothers. I'm Robin Vasquez, I use she, her pronouns. I'm with the Healthcare Authority, and my mom tells me that she wanted to pick a name that was very feminine for me when I had just been born, but she was also real tired. So she picked Robin, which is a very androgynous name. Like, that's not what I intended. I think it's Hi, my name is Sue Richards, she, her. The interesting thing about my name is my mom named me Sue because I'm going to call you Sue, I want your name to be Sue, so she didn't name me Susan. My middle name is Anne, and when I was middle school, high school, I always wanted to have a 2-syllable name. Everybody else had 2 syllables, and so I started using my middle name. So when I find things, some people see Sue Ann and they call me Sue Ann, but most people call me Sue, but I started using my middle name.
Good morning. I am Catherine Isle Vasquez, and I'm going to talk about my middle name. That is a feminine name. That is shortened from my great-grandfather, Isle Waterland. He was a son of a Cowlitz chief. So that's the history of my name. Good morning. My name is Amandeep Puri, and my first name, Amandeep, has a beautiful meaning. It means a lamp of peace. But it is a very common name back in India. Like every class that I went to had like 4 Amandeeps. And then I moved here and people hear my name and they're like, oh, what a unique name you have. I'm like, oh, that's weird. So that's the interesting thing about my name.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim, which is a very simple name, but I think that's because I'm the 6th of 7 children, and my second to the oldest sister named me. I do think my parents were tired, and so I have a younger brother too who was named by an older sibling as well. I think I just kind of gave up at that point and carried on.
Excuse me, I find it really interesting that virtually all of us have some story about our names. I just think that's interesting how families do this. My name's Tamara. My middle name's Kay, C-A-Y. I was actually Michelle until I was 3 days old. And my story was that my dad came in and said, not sure who that is, but it's Michelle. And so my mom had always liked Tamara, but my dad was named after his grandmother. And so my grandmother was, she got my K, C-A-Y. So I got a middle name, and I'm Tamara.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura, and I also have a grandma story. So I was named after Strata. I was named after my grandma. So it is kind of a tradition in my family. The first either boy or girl that's born after a relative passes away, you are named after them. So I was the first girl in the family that was born after my grandma passed away. So that's how I ended with the name, Laura. Interesting, I didn't really like my name when I was growing up. I felt very dramatic. And then something changed, and I'm very proud of my name now. You might want to she heard first.
Pat McGregor. I am 3 months in also with the Washington State Patrol after having been in education for 23 years. The interesting thing about my name is, A, I'm not related to Conor McGregor. I get that a lot. But I am a junior but have never met my father. So that's the interesting part.
Hello, my name is Cheyenne Carnitas, and interesting, there is actually a story behind my name. Cheyenne, I was named after a movie called Cheyenne Autumn, which is, I believe, a Western movie way back when. So my mom said she watched the movie and she just liked the name.
Ours is Spanish. My mother and father are Mexican Americans, and actually the name Garza is one of 8 Spanish families that found Monterrey, Mexico, the 3rd largest city in Mexico. I'm not Spanish, I'm Mexican, out of that. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Brian Keith Meyer. There's 5 letters in each of my names, so we get a little bit of a connection there. My last name is Meyer, but not spelled the way you expect it to be. It's M-Y-H-R-E. And the reason my name is that is when he got off the boat from Norway to the United States, he said, "What's your name?" Aslex Asbjørnsen. I can't spell that. You're Meyer like the guy in front of you. You pick the spelling.
Good morning. My name is Latasha Andrea Renee Tisdale, long name. They named me after everyone, all of their favorite people. My father wanted a very French sounding name because he's French Creole. And I want to welcome all of our virtual guests. So we have 35 at the moment, and I'm hoping that everybody can hear us. They are also sharing their name origins as well online. Welcome to everyone.
Good morning, everybody. I grew up in England. My dad was Irish, my mother English, but I'm called Karen. And the reason I'm called Karen is my mother spent some time in Germany. I came back with that pronunciation of Karen as Karen. And so I've always gone by Karen, but now it's become sort of even more important to be Karen than not necessarily Karen saying that's what I'm saying. So I'm Karen. Nice to meet you.
Hi, morning. My name is Tim Church, and I'd say the interesting thing for me is it depends on how you know me, which version of Tim that you use. When there are people who I grew up with who, when I run into today, I'm still Timmy to them, and it doesn't matter how old I am, I'm still Timmy to them. To my wife, and sometimes to my mother, when I was in trouble, it was Timothy, and then most people know me as Tim.
My name is Kristen Iris Peterson. I guess the most interesting thing about my name is my middle name. I'm named after my aunt.
So just name and then something interesting about your name.
Oh, okay. So my name is Mary Beth Sapinoso, and I was born in the Philippines. My parents named me Mary Beth. It's supposed to be Mari Beth. It's spelled M-A-R-I-B-E-T-H. So it's not really Mary Beth, but I say Mary Beth. But my parents say Mari Beth, and they combine both of my grandmothers from each of my parents' side. Marty and then Beth, and they put it together.
Hi, everyone. Marie Burrows. Marie Madeline Burrows for my name, named after my aunt, my dad's sister, Marie, and then Madeline was my grandma. So with my both family names. Excited to be here.
All right, thank you, everyone. And I appreciate, Tasha, I think you came up with the icebreaker, and I love that one just because it's like you were saying, everybody has an interesting story to their name. So thank you for pointing that out, Tamara. So I'm going to talk a lot at you for the first couple of minutes, and then after that, hopefully not talk a lot for the rest of the time because this is going to be a working meeting. The purpose of why we're here is we have a lot of work to do. We have a bunch of measures. You'll see them on your sheets. So if you want to just start grabbing one piece of paper for each of those sections, the main one that we're going to be looking at right now is the stapled document that's got a pie chart on the front, a colored pie chart. That's the one that we're going to be looking at first. But the purpose of what we're doing in the morning session, we're going to be looking at those measures. There are about 20 measures on there. And when we look at those measures, the task that we have at hand right now is to narrow those down to our top 4.
That is not going to be easy. And so before we start with that, I just want to jump into a couple of norms or working agreements for the room for when you came in. They are stolen, or kind of we're emphasizing or giving honor to both Glenn Singleton, who wrote the book Courageous Conversations. So they're taken from him, but also used heavily by Cultures Connecting, which is a company based out of the Renton area that does equity and inclusion work, and it's norms for having courageous conversations. These types of conversations, as we talk about, you know, what's important to us, especially as we start to tell our story about why something might be important to us, it falls into the line of what is a courageous conversation. And so that's why we wanted to just share some norms to start off. But the first one is just to stay engaged. I've got 2 phones in there, my watch is buzzing, I've got other things I'm thinking about. And then there's times where I hear conversations where it's just really easy to say, you know what, this is hard. I think I'm just going to check. What I ask is for the time that we're in here, both in the morning session and the afternoon session, is just to stay engaged. If you need to take a call, you need to answer an email, I get it. If you don't mind just stepping out of the room, but otherwise lead into the conversation, even when it gets uncomfortable, and to speak your truth. And that really what that means is oftentimes we have this wanting to say, well, I believe that this is right, or some people might say this is important, or what are you saying? And it's really to say, like, this is what's important to me. So to speak your own truth, because each person is in here representing their own experience, their own lived experience, their own, if you work for a state agency or you're coming from the community, you're representing that as well. But to speak from your own truth, even if you're going to be in disagreement with somebody else in the room, conflict is healthy, especially when we're trying to get different opinions and different perspectives in the room. So if you're hearing something and you're like, I don't agree with that, don't be afraid to speak your own. The experienced discomfort is sometimes when we have disagreements, or sometimes when we're doing stuff where we're not going to get to a kind of perfectly tied up in a bow end result. That can be uncomfortable, but just to experience it, to acknowledge it, but to keep moving through the process. This is going to be an uncomfortable process for anyone who likes to kind of thoroughly vet something. This is going to be rushed, and it is going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people in the room, but we are kind of practicing that and leaning into that. And that leads into the next one, which is to expect and accept non-closure. Like, as I said, we have about an hour's time to go from 20 measures to 4 measures. That is very quick. You're going to feel like, there's one more that's missing, or I wish we could have talked about this more. It's going to feel like we don't have closure when we walk out of the room, but this is not going to be the final result. We're going to be working on these. Just because we end up with these top 4 doesn't mean that agencies won't use other measures as well. These are just going to be the things that we say, this is what we want to highlight right now because we think it's the most important to call out, but it doesn't mean that others aren't important or that we're not going to be doing other work after this. And then the final one is just listen for understanding. It kind of weaves into all of the norms, but that idea of like when we're in disagreement, when we're hearing someone who shares a different perspective from us, it's easy to kind of listen to say, I want to respond. I'm ready to say what I want to say. And to just stop, to put that on hold and to say, I'm going to listen and try to understand where the other person's coming from. And through that, I think we can get to a better. So are there any questions about the norms before we kind of jump into the work? Any questions about the process? Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do, does everybody have or can look through the document that has the metrics on here, or the measures? Okay. Okay. So we're going to do, I'm going to give you actually, because it's 10:48. So at 10:53, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes to, 5 minutes to just look through it quietly. I know you have to share with somebody else, but just look through on your own, read through them. And then we're going to just give you a chance to look through. If you have any questions, we'll debrief at the end to say, does anybody have any questions about it? But right now, just be looking through and kind of in your head, be thinking about what are the top ones that I personally think are important. So any questions about that? All right.
Is anyone checking chat?
Yes, I am reading chat and as I understand it, nobody has any of the documents. Is that my understanding? Nobody has any of the documents that
Yeah,
we're talking
there's no documents on the site or were linked or emailed.
on the site. Okay, great. Hold on one moment, please. I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
mute. Nobody is speaking, so I'm just gonna be on mute for a moment.
Workshop. So it's about how do we bring more equity into how we do public employment, how we measure public employment. So what does our workforce look like? Who are the people who are in our state government workforce? So not city, county, or private sector, but just specifically for state government. And how would we measure a way to get to more equity? So what are the measurements that we want to look at that will get us to a more equitable outcome for our workforce?
Are you looking at the same thing I'm looking at?
Assistant Director of the Web and Communication. I'm with the State Arts Commission. I'm the Director of the State Arts Commission. I think the State Arts Commission.
Not like
I don't believe it.
Okay, let me. So if I go in.
Diversity Council.
So what is important? Because when I see this at L9, sometimes people choose, for lack of a better word, stuck because they're in a certain position. They don't have the
So that's what I
training or skill to go to
So having
level because an individual being stuck in kind of entry level or and so I know that's not just true kind of training. I want to talk about it, but I think training is important to give people an opportunity within
Well, I was gonna say, if you take that document, you should be able to just upload the chat so that everybody can like download it themselves. Yes, you have it saved on your computer.
This one?
No, the one.
Oh, I did. Okay, perfect. Yeah, I did. It's in there now.
I was gonna say,
Yeah,
since there are so many people in it, it might be helpful to.
I think I might do that.
Okay, either Padlet or if you wanted to do breakout rooms.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure they give you, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I want everybody to hear it. So, okay. Yeah, I think I'm gonna.
Because, well, so what
I just something very specific as opposed to improve on
where the table groups actually come up, it's where they
where
they come up with their top.
Okay, so we want this group, we're gonna have this group come up, try to come up with.
You can, yeah, it tap, like if you just use the Padlet, they can all vote.
Okay.
Yep. Everyone's gonna share their top four. Sue's gonna share it, like write it. And we're gonna do voting afterwards, so then we can add that to the Padlet, like a second bullet and have the vote too. Does that work?
Yep.
Struggle in that diverse, right? It's kind of improving and retaining it first. Where people not maybe as hard and
this thing was Seattle, which 21 years.
Yep. This area that hires women come in a little bit.
Yeah.
And
So, first one, to increase diversity of workforce, and that's sort of the same, the equity tool and if I think it's exactly the same as that one, isn't it? So, increase job security within the building.
I think you were saying about training and training for cleaning up. Of course, there's any general training because they choose specific to, let's say, maybe at someone grade to be a specialist position. How do they get to the supervisor grade?
Something I've been thinking
Increase job training within a year of employment. Several trainings.
Yeah, I would say that you're right, that the measure around training I'm supported, but I'm not sure within a year of employment is that important, but I don't measure around training.
Yeah.
We received the agency 800. Constantly. The good one is what happens now often is learning agencies and then they'll get hired by. I'm sure a lot of another position. And so the hard part for me is we're always hiring. We hire people at entry level, they learn and they move.
I'm not sure.
I think so.
We really like. Some measure around training. The equity tool for all hires or someone to help, an equity lens around hiring.
Yeah, I would say hiring and recruiting. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's two.
Mm-hmm.
We had both the increase the recruitment and retention of diverse.
And this is where it's going to get a little more difficult. So in your table groups now, so we're expanding to the whole table group, you all are going to come up with what you think are your top 4. So you'll share out together what your top 4 are, see where you have your similarities, see where there's something unique. But when you have something where there's not a lot of similarities and you want to like make your case for why that should be in your agreed upon top 4, but you're going to have 15 minutes for this. We're going to give you more time to do this, but to share out. And the goal after 15 minutes, and I'll give you a 5-minute warning, is to come up with a table agreement on what your top 4 are. And if you can identify who will be your scribe, someone who can make sure you get your top 4 written down, and then also who will share out, because we are going to share out what your top 4 are as a table and the why behind it, because we're going to use that to share it so that people understand why, so that later we can do an all vote and identify what our are collectively as a group. So right now, 15 minutes to identify what your top 4 as a table is. Yes, Karen.
If we don't want them, we write them.
You mean like you want to have a new one or a better written way?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's all living. So yes, we can change it if you have one. Then you can add one if there's one that's missing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So the first, it's going to be something around training. So it could be something like, emphasize equity and improving tools for all hiring and recruitment practices or something like that. I'm busy rewriting, as you can see. And I'm not the main voice here.
So we were looking at both the increased recruitment and retention of those workforce, but also the increased DEI trainings for all new hires. I wouldn't say increase the number of them, but increase the quality of them. Make sure that they are for the workforce that we have. So we could even take that one and just tweak the phrasing of it and use that as
okay. So I'm just adding something around as a small agency, we struggle with budget. And, the frame is $5 million, and we just don't have the money.
Right.
Maybe that could be in there for affordability or availability.
So it's the increased DEI trainings for all new hires, maybe increase the quality and affordability of trainings.
Oh, yeah.
There's definitely a have and have nots.
So I think the only thing I'm trying to figure out is like to get to a final 4 for the group, how do we take what they come up with and then try and take that so we can combine two.
Do you think we need paper? Do you think we're good?
I'm just gonna write on we actually can also do whatever they want current staff as well as hires and promotions. And not just the new one, but then what about the different? I was just trying to think of things.
I think
they come up with their
from my viewpoint, because I am working in training right now, I think that's 2 things. There's 2 separate tasks. One of them is everybody that comes on board gets the same training. But then how do you scaffold? How do you develop training for people that are already here that isn't just a repeat of what they got when they should have? So my thought on it, and obviously you all have different perspectives, but my thought on it is it's 2 separate tasks.
Like everyone individually. So we're probably look at something
that makes sense.
And then we'll take whatever those tallies are up here and then pick our top 4 that way. We can just say, because once again, sometimes the training is because they don't have the values. We're the ones that are already.
Right.
Oh well.
Right. So what we've had to do for some of the training is
I think we're good. I think I'm good. I mean, I've let everybody in. I'm at 37. It was at 41. People are looking at Padlet. Hopefully they're using that as a supplement to being in the different
classes that DES offers.
Yeah. They're looking at the Word document. I dropped it in because they didn't have it. In advance so that they can review it. And yeah, I think we're doing as well as we can. I will turn the camera on at some point again when it's report out, but
yeah, I think if you can throw the mic up when they
I have it is, or the mic.
Actually, we can hear it. So,
And the section of the diverse workforce.
Is there
We
a
had
mic
that,
over
the
here?
fourth bullet there. Yep.
Yeah.
I could hear it when you heard it out. So I was thinking of like amplifying
That
the
seems
microphone,
like,
but I was like, no, I think it's necessary.
you know, doesn't it?
Because I'm good with that one right now.
Yeah.
Because it covers a lot of
Does.
these others.
This is gonna be tricky because not everybody's gonna land on the same number. So not sure how to.
But they're sharing it.
Government, state government.
I'm gonna see if.
We'll just throw jobs out and we'll get 50 applicants and it'll be really easy and we'll pick one and it's a different one. And certainly we're trying to get a more diverse job applicant pool. You've got to purposefully try. You can't just throw it out there and hope.
So we, the team that works across from my team's cubicle, they're trying to hire a new person for the protective family leave stuff. And they put it out for a month and got 4 applicants. And only 2 were actually qualified to interview.
Yeah, it's a different reality.
We have something like 500 job openings right now at LNI and more than 100 claim manager positions open. So we're doing paid advertising and just everything like that.
The increased budget allocation for child and adult care. You're talking about equity. You know, that's a huge barrier for people even being able to apply for a job.
I do like the idea, but I almost think it needs to be a little bit broader, just in my thought. Because yes, if we increase that portion, that's overcoming one barrier. There are other barriers to not only hiring but also retaining people, which things like remote work is alleviating. It's not fixing it, but it's alleviating. So if I agree that this needs to be in there, but do we want to have this be the narrow plan, or do we want to go a little bit broader?
And part of me thinks that with the bite-size option,
it's true.
Can't do everything, and you know, part of these are too big. So I don't know what do you think? I mean, even if you're working at home, it's not like you can just have all the kids running.
Absolutely.
You just work.
Absolutely. You still need support for, yeah. Agreed.
Should we put it in?
Sure. Okay.
Look at our number 4. You want to add to it? Just, I think for the moment it could just be as it is.
If you look at the 5th bullet, utilizing EDI lens, it said you did hiring, promoting.
It's a bit like number 1.
Is it?
No, that's training, isn't it?
Right.
That was my training.
So actually we should have something like
About the EDI lens so that you're all, because now when we interview.
What do you think that means? And I'm not trying to get too introspective, but what does it mean when it says use the EDI lens? How does, I'm asking just because I don't know exactly what that means in terms of practicality.
For me, when we're hiring, you know, it could be a tipping of a scale. You know, if you have 2 identical candidates on every level, that there's somebody who is from a diverse background, it might tip it that way a little bit. So it's using it for both. But you have to be very careful, obviously.
Yeah. Right. So how do you do that? Because you're out there doing that.
So that's part of what we're really wrestling with first on the pair workforce in the healthcare authority is how do we implement that? And the example that we start off with is like for veterans hiring preference. We don't use a point system for hiring, therefore veterans can't get that extra 5 or 10 points in the hiring thing. But what we do is how do we implement that specific piece for that protected class of people that are applying, and it turns into if they meet all the qualifications, they automatically should at least get to the interview stage. So finding a practical way to implement DEI practices to create a balance of diversity in the workforce.
Not requiring a degree. Something that we've been looking at. I think of that as like a lens or a tool.
Shifting those requirements to the nice to have rather than.
Thank you for that. Because let me give you you probably won't know if somebody was, you know, exceptionally low income, right? Unless they told you, you wouldn't say, oh, this person is really low income, so we shouldn't consider them because you probably wouldn't know. You're not asking on that application.
Right. And asking those questions, getting into the point of, are you using this to exclude or are you using this to include?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right.
Are you happy to report that? Sure, why not?
Yeah, I think even allowing remote, I'll go for it. Opportunities.
It does.
That they wouldn't.
Yeah.
And
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of our relatively senior people are working from Seattle, even though the office is in downtown Olympia.
Are you with PBS?
No, I'm with Healthcare Authority.
Oh. I'm with ESD. With your ESD, I'm the Arts Commission.
I'm with Ellen, Irene, and Brian. And actually, most of them are the one. Brian and I know each other.
So we have 3 minutes left. So if you.
So if we need to elaborate, would you like to, if someone to elaborate, would you like to elaborate?
I think you'll do perfectly well when or anybody.
There are 4. They're fantastic. Okay, yeah. They're doing fantastic. I gave to their top. If we can, yeah, the virtual group they're on fire over here. So, yeah.
Latasha, you're with state HR?
I am. I'm 2 months old in my role. Yeah, 2 months old in my role. I'm the DEI Innovations Manager for OFM State HR. Yep. So this is very important. Most of my team anyway is here in the space. We're taking notes and we want to hear directly from the people what we need to do. You know what I mean? The things we need to shift. So it's very important that we gather these voices often and regularly and listen. So we're really here to listen. That's why I'm not speaking as much, because I really am here to listen. So even though you asked a question, I don't want to answer it. You know what I mean? I really want to hear what the state needs, what is needed. And so this is very important. So I'm trying to capture all the virtual voices in one space because I'm multitasking. I want to elevate every single voice at the same level so the people here in the space physically are in alignment or have the same level of care as the people in the virtual space.
Is state HR pretty small these days? I mean, it used to be a large kind of self-contained agency, but now
I don't know what you mean by small.
Numbers of people.
I don't think it's small. Like there are some small agents, that are small. No, I would say medium. I would say medium. I'm guessing maybe like 82 people, maybe 70.
Oh, really? HR building in downtown, and they had the things on the wall of which jobs would be.
All right, 1 minute left. Oh, yeah. You can start determining what your top 4 are as a table and who will be sharing out with the larger group. Just remind you of the discomfort of past processes and that nothing is going to feel complete, but that this is part of the work, and that this doesn't mean that this is the end or that this is set in stone or that your organization won't be able to do the work. So what we're going to do now is hopefully you have your designated speaker. We'll do one table at a time. if you just want to share out with the rest of the group what your top 4 were and kind of a high level why, or why you chose those top 4. But before we do that, I think we'll start with the virtual group since they were the first to finish. And if they had a chance to share their why, but at least to share their top 4 measures.
Did you hear that, virtual team? They're ready for us to report out.
I'm not sure anybody volunteered to talk, but I'm happy to.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, so, and everybody can hear you, so go ahead.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lisa Kistler. So I think where we landed was 1, 4, 14, and 27 seem to be the most popular.
Could you read them? Could you read those out loud because they have a different.
Okay. So number 1, improve hiring practices. Number 4, increase diversity in internship and apprenticeship programs.
Hang on 1 second. There's somebody scribing inside, so I want to improve. So I'm going to use my mic. How do I do this? Improve. So she said improve hiring practices. And then what was the second one?
Increase diversity in internship and apprenticeship programs.
Just pause for a second, Lisa.
Yep.
We just want to make sure that your voices are in this space.
Yeah.
Through internship.
And apprenticeship.
And apprenticeship. Excellent. And we're ready for the third one now, Lisa.
Sorry, I'm getting the, somebody else is looking at the, okay. Sorry. We'll try to multitask looking at the chat. So I'm gonna jump to the one that had the next most mentions, which is increase recruitment and retention of diverse workforce.
Excellent.
And then we had, I'll just say it's difficult to get to consensus in chat with 40 people in the virtual. So
I know.
A few that were mentioned quite a few times.
That's fine.
For the fourth one. So hopefully that's not like breaking the rules.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So number 14, which is increase WMS and exempt leaders by demographic.
Got it. And then give me the last one, because this was, each table here had maybe 6 people. Y'all did a fantastic job. I just want to give you a round of applause for coming up with 4 or 5, with 46 people in the room. I'm just saying. So go ahead and give me that extra one. Give me that extra one.
And then 26, which is increase leadership awareness of BRGs.
Fantastic. Thank you again. And later on, we'll turn cameras on and say hello, but I'm going to turn my camera off, or I'm going to keep the camera facing for now, and you can go ahead and go on mute. Thank you so much for listening.
Yep.
Thank you to the virtual team. And then, so now we'll move on to different tables. And if you have something that's already been said, you can just say, well, that one's already been said. But if you want to share a why behind it, but then otherwise share anything new, because we're going to be using this to kind of collectively vote afterwards. So is there any table that wants to go first? Here, okay, go ahead, Kristen. It was stressful trying to get all this, we had to do a bad vote at the end. So we came up with, you have number 3 up there. No, I'm sorry. Number 4, you have up there, increase WMS and exempt leaders by demographics. The why for that is a person coming aboard sees themselves in leadership. And it's a better experience for them. We then also came up with
create equity tool for all hires, all new hires and appointments. And it kind of linked into the number one, improve hiring practices, but number one seems ambiguous and like smushy. So this seems more of like a direct thing. The next one is increase budget allocation for child care and adult care. And this was one we actually didn't pick until we got as a group and just started talking about it. We believe that this, and actually just providing childcare, I think would be a fantastic thing. As a recruitment tool, specifically on our workforce that have to be at the place of employment, nursing homes, institutions of any kind. We need to have that. Then finally, we improve the experience of Black state employees. And again, we have got the our folks at ESD talking about how they've started to do that at their agency, and really creating spaces and making it a place where people, going back to Mr. Powell, belonging. So that's what we came up with.
So someone at our table noted that that's a goal, not a measure. So we are going to have to figure out how we measure making our spaces more welcoming and improving the experience of Black employees.
We'll go next.
Thank you. Okay. So the first one we have is increased quality and affordability for all new hires of DEI training. So we also had that increased recruitment and retention that's already up there. And then we also have the increased budget allocation for childcare.
Is that one already? That's okay. That one's already out.
Yeah, it's already up there. And then we also have utilized EDI lens when promoting.
Okay, so our group, just a little bit of process. For me, I was thinking, because as we started going through the list, we were noticing, and I learned a new word today, affinitize. But how might we group some of these so that I'm just a visual person, so I was thinking chart paper, and how do we group some of these things here? Because we also wanted to kind of spread it out a little bit, so our focus was on different things. So we didn't put all our eggs into the hiring basket, maybe, but there were different things. So that might have been for me, would have been a helpful exercise to see where the similarities were. But the group came up with 4, and we sort of went through getting people in the door, hired, trained. So that's kind of what our thinking was and our why. So our first one was to increase underrepresented applicants. That was number 1 for us. 2 was, I think we had this one, the increased hiring process advancement by demographic. Was that up there? 3 was increased DEI trainings, and we added something to make sure that we included cultural training in there. So we kind of added on to we kind of combined some, yeah. So not just for new hires, but for everybody. I put for all. Last was our equity tool, which is as well.
Utilize EDI lens when promoting?
No, create equity tool for all new hires.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn off my camera and look at that.
We're making live. Sorry. So I'm going to mess this up. I think you already had. We can't see again. Improving hiring practices was already on the right. Yes, I think so. We were trying to combine increased culture training opportunities, increased DEI trainings for careers, maybe.
you all nailed it with your combined over there. So I think we're just gonna go with yours. No, because we're just gonna steal what they said. Because it works. Then we came up with our own. We were talking about the last bullet around improving the experience of state employees, and then started talking about data and identifying gaps. So we decided that a lot of agencies aren't really doing that yet. So we wanted to come up with our own, which was identifying data, identify data, identify agency, and then identify action. That way you have the data that supports the actions you're taking. Identify action. And the last one is a combination of two of them, because we like to make things simple. And it's identify and focus on, it's all here, I'm so sorry. You need to describe. Improvement of demographics. For new hires and internal movement. And for employment status. And then in parentheses, it says full-time, part-time, and seasonal.
All right, thank you, everyone. So the next thing we're going to do, if you can pull up your papers so that you have it in front of you, the definition sheet and the measure worksheet. Before we vote, we want to go through what this means. And so when you talk about what are we trying to accomplish with these measures, what are the things that we think that if we keep visible and we measure and do actions to try to improve, that those things will lead to pro-equity, anti-racism work. So what do we mean by pro-equity? And I will read it just because the chat, but I know you can also read yourself. Anyway, so pro-equity. Pro-equity is the proactive way of doing equity work, involves starting from the knowledge that we live in a society permeated by racism and bigotry. So we should be looking to combat or control that in every action, no matter whether it's an incident or not. So that's what we mean when we say pro-equity. When we say anti-racism, we say anti-racism is a process of actively identifying and opposing racism. The goal of anti-racism is to challenge racism and actively change the policies, behaviors, and beliefs that perpetuate racist ideas and actions. Anti-racism is rooted in action. It is about taking steps to eliminate racism at the individual, institutional, and structural levels. When we talk about universal access, this is a working definition. It means barrier-free access for all people to and deliver of Washington state government services, programs, activities, employment, and communications, including but not limited to disability access and accessibility and language access. And then when we talk about belonging, belonging is both objective and subjective. It is the expressive or communicative message that a group belongs. Belonging is used fully when included groups have more than a voice. They're actually able to reshape the institution together with existing stakeholders. So those are the things that we're working toward. And before we get into like, what are the measures that we are determining that we think are the top four, I want you to know what we're gonna have to do in the afternoon so that you know, you have an informed decision about what you're picking. So if you look at this sheet, which shows the measures, what we're gonna be doing in the afternoon is we're gonna be taking those four measures and we're gonna be saying, what is the measure? And then how are we going to assess whether that is something that we can, what are we gonna do to assess? Part of the conversation we'll be having is, do we have data right now? Do we not? Would we have to get data? How could we get the data if we want to assess? So like Robin, you had mentioned, it's the improving the experience. What was the experience of Black employees? Yeah, so how would we measure that? If we want to choose that one, how would we measure that? Would we use our employee engagement survey where we have demographic data? Would we need to get different demographic data? And what would that measurement look like? So whatever we pick, we know that we're going to work on it this afternoon and that we're going to have to talk through what would we use to be able to measure that? And if we don't have something right now, how would we measure that? So for folks who are newer to state government or newer to your agency, you'll want to have that conversation or be open to asking the question from folks who are in the room who have more experience with what data is available. Or I just wanted to share that. So with that knowledge, before we get into like the individual vote, and I will preface again, it's going to feel like it's not complete. It's going to feel like, oh, is this the fairest way to be able to get to the top 4? The answer is no. It's a way where we can get to a top 4, but again, this is a working document. This is something that we're going to highlight, but it does not mean it is the only work that we're going to be doing. It's just about within this group of people, with people who have knowledge of what our hiring practices are, as well as experiences and needs of what the kind of disparate impacts are for our workforce right now. What are the things that we want to focus on? So with that in mind, before we get into the voting, and want to open this up for the folks in the virtual room too, since they did have like 40 people narrowing it down to 4. Is there anything that's missing that we think really needs to be on there for a vote for the rest of the people? Any measure that's missing? And I'm going to give like some quiet space, but then Tasha, if you don't mind reading if anything shows up in the chat, and then if folks want to share anything out as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's missing so much as I think there's about 4 different versions of DEI training related ones that are all kind of mash up. I think they should be more mashed up because they're similar, started with the same parents, but it morphed a little bit by each group.
Just sort of thinking about at the Arts Commission, which is rival, hiring is often by the lack of by wages. You know, the state wages often don't compare with private industry. So I wonder to the group, should there be a focus on more parity within the wage structure at the state level to I don't know, to approximate private industry? I know we can't obviously get close to many of it, but to have a focus on it so we don't lose people, you know, which I think we often risk doing. I don't know, I'm throwing it out for the group.
Robin, you hand up in Laura.
For the people
I don't, still really to what Tim said, I think it's embedded in here, but I don't think we do a good job of collecting data from applicants who don't end up getting the job. And I think we're missing a huge piece of information about how to improve our hiring practices when we don't talk to people who don't get the job, right? People of color who get screened out, or veterans who are having a hard time translating their skills to the weird language of state government. We're not hearing them effectively.
Do you have a measurement that you want to add?
I think it's in one, but I just wanted it to be for us to think about applicant experience.
And for those online, what Robbie was saying, she believes it's already included and they improve the hiring practices, but she just want to call it out as a gap. What I wanted to add is, I like what you were saying about the pay, but I'm wondering if you're identifying how many of the positions across the state are below the living wage to really have an understanding of the impact. Because then if we look at the demographics and the representation, we can actually understand for those people that are getting those jobs, they still not being able to have a living wage within our workforce.
Hey, I'm gonna ask everyone on, okay, I have someone online that's gonna come on here. Cheryl, go ahead.
I'd just like to say that when we talk about
diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're talking about it in a lens of American lens. But we have to realize that we also have people from other cultures or practice other cultures. And so I think when we talk about training, we also need to be trained about other cultures too. I think it's really important. I'm in the Washington Immigrant Network for Washington State employees, and we do have a lot of immigrants. I'd love to see more. I'd like to see us reach out to more immigrant populations. I work at Highline College. I work with immigrants and refugees who have degrees, higher degrees. So right now I'm working with behavioral health, but we also work with healthcare. We also work with engineers, STEM fields. And so these are people who have degrees from other countries, and they find it very, very hard to break in. A lot of times the mandate is set, and I'll give you an example. City of Seattle, the mandate was set. We want to hire more immigrants and refugees. Yet when it came down to the middle managers or the middle HR managers, they weren't getting hired. You know, City of Seattle said yes. And then for some reason, the immigrants and refugees weren't getting hired, even though we sent a lot of people to those jobs. So I guess I have two things here. One thing is to remember that culture is not just American culture, that we have to also realize that there are other cultures that need to learn about American culture, but we need to learn about other cultures. And the second thing is to remember that HR in its various levels needs to know what's going on, who set it up, the people up top, and then they have to realize, okay, this is our mandate. We have to follow this. Let's follow it. So I guess more consistency in HR.
Fantastic, Cheryl. Is there anyone else in the virtual space that would like to share? Go ahead and take your mic off and share. Everybody can hear you. Okay, it looks like we're good. No, yep, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, there was a proposal. Oh. Okay, there was a proposal to match up or combine all of the training ones. How are people feeling about that? Okay, so we can work to do that. The other thing that I would say is I noticed there were some where folks wanted to kind of combine multiple kind of what I would say was like potentially goals or metrics together. If we think about the next step being that idea of saying, hey, we're gonna, if it becomes a top 4 and we're going to list this out and we're going to say, you know, what's the measurement and how are we going to measure this? So what data are we going to use? It can complicate how we measure when you have more than one thing to measure in your goal, so or your metrics. So is there anything, as tables talked about that or combine things together, is there anything that you might want to modify before we jump into a vote?
I would say instead of
can you wait for the mic? Sorry, Kristen.
Just instead of the increasing the budget allocation for childcare and adult care, I don't think there's a budget to increase. So maybe instead of provide, instead of just increase budget, or maybe create budget. Create a budget.
I have a question just really quick. I'm going to need to figure out a way so that the virtual room, we're going to take a break and then, okay. So, okay. I just want to make sure that they know what we're voting on. Okay.
You have a question? Sorry, I forgot. Candace.
Thank you. I have a question for everyone that goes along with our work
and the equity in the workplace. Is anyone familiar with the 1050 rule? Are you familiar with it? For part-timers. So I've been seeing a lot of that be a problem with our part-time employees that are working for the state. So the 1050 rule, it shows that once you reach a mark in your hours, the department would have to make a decision to either keep you or to have you skip a day to reset those hours. But if you get into a realm of a 380 of those hours, they can let you go. And the part to that is they don't want to transfer these part-time state employees over to 32 hours with benefits because they're saying there's no money into the budget. But when you look at, and I did some kind of, my research with it, these same departments who are letting these folks go, they are creating positions that would hone, like, for example, a position from $54,000 to $57,000 a year. But they're telling our part-timers that they don't have any money to keep them and transfer them over to 32. I think that is an issue. And I think that the WAC code, it is not clear to our state employees when it comes to our HR, and it needs to be really looked at. And I believe that WAC code is 357-04045. Because that is the issue. HR starts to tend to place their own understanding of that code when it comes to our part-timers, and it's not fair. Thank you.
And just so you know, Cheyenne here is typing along. We in state HR have a report that we're going to be turning into the governor's office that talks about what we believe as a state we can do in addition to the prayer work that as kind of HR to help dismantle oppressive systems in state government. And so gratefully, Cheyenne is joined state HR a couple of months ago and is helping us out and jumped right in and with very little onboarding to help us write that report and come up with strategies. So even when I say, like, we're going to identify the top 4 here, but when I say like the work isn't done, that doesn't mean there isn't going to be other work going on. We're collecting it as well. And so we're going to share that out. So even if we don't, if there's something up there that you're like, and it doesn't get voted on, it will get pulled into our analysis as well. All right, so does anyone need to say anything else or ask any other questions before we get into a vote? And before we vote, I'll just say, we're going to take a quick break so that we can take all this down and type it in for our virtual members to vote as well. So you'll get a chance to kind of move around. But is there any questions before we move into what the vote is like? And then you can pick when you want to vote and when you want to take the break. Yes.
Not a question, more just clarity.
For our group, part of the DEI training was funding and affordability of training. So we would want to make sure that is included in the DEI item.
Okay. And what I will clarify is when we, that's helpful to know for when we vote, and we'll have an opportunity in the afternoon to, like, when we pick our top 4 to start like piecing out what does that actually mean? What does that look like, and more details around that.
I was just picking up on what you were saying about the part-timers and so on, which kind of goes to what I was saying about salary and benefits. And so I wonder if we can have something to measure around. I wrote something down, it might not be quite right. So you focus on state salary and benefits. And we can say full and or part-time to ensure livable and competitive reality. Just something like that.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing that with Sue so she can write it down?
Sure. Focus on state salary and benefits to ensure livable and competitive reality. That's really a good point. When we use part-timers, or we don't pay them the benefits, it just seems like kind of cheap measures.
And it does have a component to our demographic that they are always the ones who are at that level, and they're are the ones who lose that position.
Yes.
It's not really a point for the board, but just as we get ready to vote, before we actually make the vote, would it be possible for somebody who's having run this to clearly state what exactly we're voting on, what we're voting for, just right before we do the vote? That way it's clear what we're thinking about when we say yes or no.
Yeah. I'm about to give you instructions. I just have learned that if I don't give the instructions right before, then people forget. So I wait till the very, very last minute. All right, so the instructions, and for the people who are in the virtual room, we are going to type these down for you into a Padlet, and then you'll have the opportunity to vote there, and then we're going to combine them. So as those of us in the room, we're not going to see what the final four are until we come back for lunch, because we're going to do the tallying when we come back from lunch. Your instructions, if you are in the physical room, is of those 14, each individual in this room will get to vote for your top 4. The way we're going to do that is Sue has kind of lined out, if you take your pens, because we don't have little sticky notes, unfortunately, but if you take your pens, and then we'll let people move through, and this is the last thing we're doing, so you can go to lunch after this. If you take your pens and just put a star or a big dot, and make sure it's clear on which one you want it to, because I know it's a little small, but make sure we know which one it is. We're going to tally up the numbers or the measure that has the most votes for it, the top 4 of those. So you're going to go through, you're going to put up to 4, honor system as it is, up to 4 dots on your top 4, or sorry, 1 dot per measure. But you can put up to 4 dots total on those measures. Does that answer your question?
I'm going to ask you about proportional voting.
No, sorry, we're not getting too complicated here. We're going real simple. Yeah. So just 1 vote per measure. You can vote 4 times. All right. For those of us in the room, you can try not to crowd too much, so like go in waves, but once you vote, you have, we'll see you back here after lunch, where we'll work on the top 4 to like list those out of how are we going to measure that and what does that look like. All right, and then for those of us in the virtual room, we're going to
hang on, yeah,
those out, and then you'll have a chance to vote.
Yep.
Virtually.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
No, I got it. I'm so good. I'm gonna do it this way and then another way, but I just want to make sure they have it while they're here. I don't want to lose anybody during their lunch break, so I just want them to have it in real time. It's all good. It's all good. I got it. I'm gonna make it happen for them.
And then put your mandatory fee over conservative.
Come back to the same group, I presume we do. Yeah. Wait, I got a veg call at 1, so I've got to take that. I'll be back. Doing yeoman's work there.
Yeah.
9 years now. Crazy when you have that to go. Mostly. It's a weird time. I mean, I asked half of my team to go in one day a week, and they are. And some of them act like, I'm Attila the Hun. I want to use just like once a week. Office, connect with others in person, and you're the worst boss ever.
Pretty used to.
You want to know you are always good. You're still good. I trust that you're going to be doing your work. But then there are others that it's like, okay, I love the fact that you're supposed to be working a full day, and I tried to get a hold of you at 8:30 and 9 and noon and 2, and you didn't answer on Teams, you didn't answer on email, you didn't pick up your cell phone. Wherever you're working, I expect you to either be working or tell us you're not working, but to have your schedule for your weekend, and we can't find you. It is. I don't like that, and it's not like especially in the public affairs, we have you know, a lot of things happen when they happen. And oh, well, sorry, you know, tell me. Yeah, a little bit of that, but for the most part, it's going okay. It's fun. A building. Yeah, we're used to.
I really like your building.
It's nice, and it holds up 2,000 people on a given day. On a big day, we have maybe 300. Right, and on Monday, Fridays that you're in, it is a ghost. I mean, you could run all over the building screaming, and nobody would know. I like it as well as the next person. However, when I'm in the building and meeting with people in person, I feel like, oh, that was a good day. I felt it's productive, and I felt like I advanced my, connection with the people in a way that you just don't get over Teams meetings. And that's somebody they want to throw me exactly on paper. Right? Do my job anywhere. See, I'll have a computer, and it's like, yeah, I get you can physically type and do things anywhere, but there is something connecting with your coworkers and to be part of a culture and that you don't your pajamas.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I think change much more than we have. We might be close to peaking out one people. We have people over at Point Plaza, but I doubt you're going to be in Point Plaza once the lease is up. I suspect. Really? Okay.
No, we don't. Actually, we're not really back.
Yeah.
Probably.
Oh, okay.
We're starting to have.
It's funny. We literally come into Point Plaza and then everything went down. So we were only in there. I don't know if the group was in there as like a full in the whole building for more than a few months, and so it was like move in, everybody go in, and then start to think find something. I mean, with the building that holds 200 and we have 2,000, we have like 300 in the building. There's just no need to have that other.